Hello, Ashley. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here with you and to have a conversation today.
Yes, I'm excited to spotlight you and just share all the good stuff that you have going on and to highlight the story that you have as well in your book. But first we always kick off the show with some words of inspiration or encouragement from this jar that I created of stuff that I've collected over the years. So it's some inserts that are available on my website, or people can, there's also a refill too. So let's get your thoughts on this, Ashley. It says, spend more time with people who bring out the best in you, not the stress in you.
Mm.
How do you feel about that?
That's a good one. I think it's highly relevant, and I think it's one of those things that is easier said than done. I think if there's anything we can all agree on, we can often be surrounded by everything from toxic to not so helpful people. Sometimes that's friends, sometimes that's family members. And we often just get so stuck in the routine of just dealing with them, managing them, neglecting to realize what those people do for us, their impact on our mental health and our stress levels. So I think for me, this was something I struggled with as an adolescent. That's a whole other story for a different day. But one of the things I've been very intentional about as an adult is making sure I surround myself with people who add to my my wellness and my fulfillment. So easier said than done, but critically important and life-changing when you can really set boundaries and have healthy people around you.
Yeah, I know in some of your story, like you have a caregiving story, and then you have other stories where you do a lot of talking with youth and stuff, but you have had to do some editing of people in your life. So I do think that that's a relevant part of what you're all about and some of the adversity that you've been through and the resiliency that you have. Well, tell us a little bit, Ashley, for those who are just meeting you for the first time, give us a little bit of a summary of your caregiving story.
Yeah, so I was only in my late 20s when my mom, for whatever reason, we yet don't know, it's not genetic, developed early onset Alzheimer's. She was only 48 years old at the time, so it was a diagnosis none of us really ever saw coming. She was exhibiting very typical signs of early dementia, just confusion, having trouble driving, perception, and many of her doctors thought maybe she's just anxious, depressed, maybe it's a mental health thing. But then when we heard Alzheimer's, it was just out of left field. So I became a caregiver basically overnight. And for her, Alzheimer's was a long, drawn out illness. So I basically served as her primary caregiver alongside my dad for the next 8 years. And It was pretty much an everyday job. It was like many caregivers, I never felt like I shut off really until she passed. And even after that, it was a while to shut that role off. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, you were young, you're in your early 20s. Most kids in their 20s are thinking about, maybe furthering their education or where they're going to start their career and some of their dating and relationships. And 8 years is a long time. Like what helped you? Like what helped you navigate this as a young person dealing with this diagnosis of early onset dementia and watching your mom change in front of your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard on so many different levels. Like you said, I was at an age where I had my own responsibilities, where many times I needed the guidance of a mother, and even that slowly went away. I was in school, part of the other story we referenced, I went through a lot of trauma as a kid. So I was a late college student. I was finally working to get my degree, trying to pay the bills, living on my own. And suddenly this whole other issue fell into my lap. So it was a lot. I mean, I can remember being on my college campus and I would be in class, and then the next minute I'd be in my car calling doctors' offices and nursing homes and, researching things. It was just constant. Every minute was spoken for. And, I think it was very overwhelming. I lost a lot of my own independence, my own passions, my interests. I felt guilty doing something as simple as taking a vacation or a trip sometimes. But the one thing that I remember helped me really early on was when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I had no idea what that meant. I had always heard about it impacting older individuals. I didn't know what the lifespan of Alzheimer's was. And I remembered reading that Ronald Reagan lived with Alzheimer's for 10 years. So I went from this like immediate fear of like, oh my gosh, what she could die tomorrow, it's a fatal disease, to thinking, okay, maybe we have 10 years. But there was this unknown of it could be 1 year, 3 years, 10 years if we're lucky. And from that moment forward, I thought the only thing I can do is try to capture as much time with my mom as I can. So even though I was sacrificing a lot, I also knew that someday I'd look back and miss it. So I just remembered being really driven to somehow embrace each moment, be present, do as much as I could. And it kind of became this like silver lining to such an awful diagnosis, is that, well, now I get to create all these beautiful, cherished moments with her. And that was definitely like a little mindset shift that helped me stay positive in a very negative situation, is just be present, be grateful for today, be grateful for this moment to hold her hand, to take a walk, just knowing that I might not have those moments anymore. So my mindset was a big driving factor to like staying sane through it all. That's for sure.
Do you think so? When I introduced you, I kind of shared some of the, the other stuff that you've been a part of about the trauma that you had in your teenage years. But do you think in some way that better prepared you? And better is such a weird word, but that trauma prepared you for what was to come with your mom?
I do. It's interesting because when this all first happened, I had this little flash of a thought in my mind, like, is that why I went through all the other trauma? Because now it's prepared me for this. And I think in many ways it was like, okay, this isn't the first worst thing to happen to me. And I just kind of knew, like, I had resilience in me. I knew that I could find a silver lining. If I had done it previously with something hard, I could do it again. So it definitely, I tried to apply the same principles that I did to like my adolescent trauma and getting through that and dealing with it and finding positives from it and growth from it. I tried to do the same thing with the Alzheimer's.
I imagine though at the same time you're like, okay, I'm done. No more necessary. I don't need these lessons anymore. I'm good. I feel like you've got them all these hits early on in your life. How did you so I read portions of your book. To be honest, I didn't read the whole thing, but I read portions of it.
Okay.
The language of time. It's so many caregiving books, I know. But you were in the throes of your own life. Like you had your school, you had the career goals, you're dating and balancing all of that. How did you make these decisions? I guess like in the moment, like if there's other young people who are in a caregiving role listening and they're trying to date, they're trying to go to get their education or their careers going, and yet they know that there's sands through the hourglass essentially with their loved one and the time is limited. Like what helped you make some of the decisions that you made? And the one in particular I was thinking about was the trip that you took to Argentina for your school, to finish your school.
Yeah. I studied abroad for just 30 days, and it felt like the most excruciating decision to have to make. Like, could I leave for 30 days, just 1 month? And all the what ifs. What if something happens? It was a really tough decision for me to make. But I think it's cliched, but I really tried to think, what would my mom want from me? Like, she would want me to be happy. She would want me to find friendships and love and experiences, especially because, that's part of what her disease taught me is, life is short, time is short. So you have to take opportunities when you can. But I think everybody's different. I have two siblings who wanted to take a different approach. Some people don't want to have to witness the illness every day. It can be really heartbreaking and sad, whereas I tend to be somebody who is a little bit stronger to handle those day in and day out moments and challenges. So even though I sacrificed a lot, it was a conscious choice that I made that I was very happy with. But I think looking back, and this is advice I always give to caregivers, is like give yourself permission to live, because you can have this overwhelming guilt of even taking a day off or even a night off, of like not swinging by to check in to make sure dad's okay, helping. It's okay just to take time for yourself. And I think you have to be intentional about it at all times. You have to just remind yourself it's okay to take Saturday off, or like you need a night out, or you need a girls' night or a date night or whatever it is. You have to just give yourself permission to do that and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah, they are hard things to really put into practice. But you make some really good points, and that, I wasn't as young as you were when I was caregiving for my parents, but at the same time, like, they had lived this portion of their life. Like, my kids were little. Maybe I wasn't young, but I'm only going to see these like young people be young for, so many years of their life. So it is that those things like, what would mom want? What would dad want? What would this person want to be true for you? And then the realization that they've already lived this section of their life and experienced these things that you've experienced. So I applaud you for like going on to the trip to Argentina and doing those things, because the alternative of that too is like, we know what not putting recharging ourselves looks like, right? Like, I had clear examples in my family of what that looks like when you don't prioritize your own health and happiness. And that was intentional for me, is like, I don't want that. So I'm going to choose to do things differently. And burnout is detrimental to your health. And so if you keep saying no to these things that are going to bring you joy and interests that you have, it catches up with you at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever experience burnout in your thing, or was there something that kind of like happened where you're like, okay, yeah, that's not working for me?
I definitely had breaking points. I mean, I'm someone who generally keeps everything together, but I had days where I would get in the car and go scream, just
Yes.
like jump into the ocean, cry. I mean, I had tipping points, and it was between the stress of caregiving, the stress of life, the stress of unhelpful people in my life. I mean, sometimes you have these moments where it all just comes crashing down, and unfortunately it was often those rock bottom, like sobbing moments where I'd be like, I need to take tomorrow off, versus just keeping up with it in
Yes.
the process. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's okay to ask for help too, like, I remember the discomfort the day we brought in outside professional help. It was like a hard thing to release, but these things are so helpful. And like you were alluding to, you can only be so strong of a caregiver if you're strong yourself. So imagine how much more loving and present and supportive you could show up if you were fueling your own needs. So yeah, you don't always
Yeah.
see it coming.
It's like one of those things is like, test and learn it. Like, see what happens, see what you show up like, because it is counterintuitive, I think, for family caregivers to really prioritize themselves. So that's important. Did you find that your friends and your partner could relate to, what you were going through at this time, and like, what did they do to support you?
Yeah, I've always had a very small group of friends. And I think at the time that all this was happening, I really had only one close best friend, and she was at an age where she was a new mom and newly married. So she would check in and call, but there was only so much she can do. So I really didn't have a huge social network. And I think that happens as you grow up. You lose the big groups of friends. People are busy, they've got kids, they're babysitting. I
Mm.
didn't have a ton of help. And unfortunately, my partner at the time, my boyfriend, he was just extremely unsupportive. He was running a business, he was MIA half the time, and that definitely like compounded all the stress and the pain and the loneliness. He just wasn't even there, even if I called up and was desperate and needed help. So I forgive him now, but yeah, I really felt like most days it was just me and my dad, and nobody else could get it. And the more you feel that way, you just kind of start to keep it to yourself, right? You do feel really alone after a while.
Yeah, it can be isolating. There's more, I think, now than there was, for me when I was in the initial throes of caregiving, or for you as a young caregiver. Like, there are a lot more resources, I feel like, than what there were back when you started your journey. And so, whether people find the things through Facebook communities or other podcasts or support groups in their area, like, I always try to encourage people to kind of click into that, because it can be very socially isolating, and it just is healing to be able to kind of have somebody see you and talk about those things. So hopefully we've hit that with somebody. But talk about your book, Ashley. So it's called The Language of Time, and I love the way that you phrased it about why you chose this title, but I'd love to hear it out of your mouth.
Yeah. So As a teenager, I started journaling during my difficult moments in life. So it's no surprise that as an adult, I'm still a journaler. And as I was caring for my mom, I used my journal to kind of vent, but also really try to archive those little moments that we shared, the things she said, the things we did each day. And slowly throughout the process of caring for her, I was blogging, and someone said, you should turn this into a book. So I never intended to write a memoir, but essentially the language of time is just that. It's a memoir chronicling the 8 years of caregiving, but also a lot of stories of childhood too, trying to really pit like the reversal of roles, recalling all those years my mom braided my hair for dance recitals, and now I'm helping her. And so I tried to bring everything into the book, everything from the challenging moments and what one can do to really the beautiful moments and the memories and the things that we should cherish with our loved ones while we can. And, I think there were so many different book titles. I mean, the language of time, it has many different nuanced meanings to me. But it's kind of like, is there a language for time? Is there a universality that we can speak to it? And if there is, maybe it's just simply now, right? Maybe that is the only word that we need to know to explain time, is that all we have is the present moment. And then, of course, like other quirky ways, when you have a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, there's all these other language tweaks, and I was constantly watching the clock, and every day was how close are we to this potential 10-year timeline. And yeah, there was just a lot of little symbolic things throughout the year
Yeah.
that made me feel like time was a core concept.
One of the things that they do to kind of show the progression, I think, of dementia is they draw the clock, right? And like they can kind of like, people do the circle and draw in the numbers and the hands of a certain time. But instead of testing your mom's progression on that, you did bunnies, which really struck a chord for me, because my mom taught me how to draw bunnies, like the same bunny that you mentioned. And then I also got the backwards bunny. I don't know if your mom taught you how to draw like the back view of the bunny, where you see just the tail and the head and the ears, but it was
No,
all with circles. And I literally was just like, oh, that brought up such a sweet memory of drawing the bunnies. But that was something from long-term memory for your mom. And it was something that she had drawn and showed you. And that struck a chord. I had to tell you about that. And then you did talk too in the book about like the role switch up, right? Like they're always our parent. Like I don't particularly like the term parenting our parents. Like it feels disrespectful to me. Like they're still our parent. And if you use it out there, no judgment, but that's my personal hang up with the phrase, but it is a switch up of roles. And so your mom liked to keep a tidy house. And so then you find yourself like doing the cleaning and trying to keep those holiday traditions alive. Like, what was that like for you, Ashley, to kind of have that switch up role? Like, how would you describe it to somebody?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, caring for my mom, supporting her, being dependent on me felt like a gift. I felt like, what a blessing that I get to be this for her, especially later in the disease where, she would get very scared. She had these delusions. She, would look forward to me the same way a little kid would be like excited when their mom walked in the door. It's a sense of safety. I was like, wow, what a gift that I get to be like a beacon of safety for her. Like, I just thought that was such a beautiful thing that I might not have had with my mother otherwise. But then with all the other stuff, like taking care of the house, taking care of my sisters, checking in with my dad, I think my mom, as like a stay-at-home mom, you don't realize how much a stay-at-home mom does. You don't realize like how often she's cleaning. I've realized now my dad's like a bit of a hoarder, because now I look at the house like, wow, mom really was the only one cleaning this place. So yeah, it was overwhelming to realize like how much she did and how many gaps needed to be filled.
There's like a lot of invisible work. There's invisible work that mothers do, and there's invisible work that family caregivers do, frankly, where it's like, yeah, when you start adding it all up, it's like, wow, this is a lot. And this is why it's like not a one person job, right? You do need to get your team of people together. And journaling was really important to me in my caregiving journey too. And so we're going to get into the Just for You daily self-care journal stuff later, but I love that you were you able to process your thoughts and your emotions through that. And then now you have this legacy, essentially, like this memoir, to honor, the care that you gave to your mom, and the adversity and the resilience that you have. It's beautiful. And another thing that brewed up that was a very positive thing. There's a lot of positive things coming from Ashley, which I love that, because I think a lot of people just lean towards the dark side of caregiving. Yes, two things can be true at the same time. It can be a very heavy and dark experience in some ways, and yet the joy is so vibrant, because it's, if you put a diamond like in the middle of the dirt, it's going to really shine and gleam. Did you feel that way, or is that that there was joy in caregiving?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful experience. I think it's a gift. And I still wish I could go back and do something as simple as like put chapstick on my mom's lips. I mean, there's just beauty in every little moment. So yeah, and even just seeing her joy and her glee at like getting out of the house, the fresh air, like watching the sunset, being out at the ocean, things that she couldn't really do on her own anymore. It was like, all right, like, the earth is a beautiful place, life is beautiful. And yeah, there were so many just blissful
Good.
moments in all of it.
I want people to kind of take the hope and that the good stuff that, life is messy, and we've got always a weight of the kind of the good and the bad and the tough stuff. Another beautiful idea brewed between you and a friend at your mom's funeral, where you came up with something. Talk a little bit about what transpired in that conversation and what's been going on since then.
Yeah, perfect story example of like silver linings and things that come out of dark places. So it was the day of my mother's funeral. I was with my very close theater friend, Greg Silver. He's wonderful, still in the theater world. And he turned to me and he said, Ashley, I have this crazy idea. What if we put on a play in your mom's memory and we can donate all the proceeds to Alzheimer's? And I have like a business nonprofit events background. He's got a big theater background. I also have like a pageant and dancing background. So I'm not new to this world, but I said, well, let's do it. Let's figure it out. And somehow 6 weeks later, we produced a musical. We did a full weekend of 4 shows. We almost sold out every single show. We raised a few $1,000s for Alzheimer's, and the community said to us, what show's next? And we were like, are we starting a theater company? So we started this company and we built philanthropy into our mission. And so every single show that we did, we picked a different charity that was relevant, all local charities. And in 3 years, we produced 6 shows and we donated 30,000 total back to different
That's
causes.
amazing.
So, yeah, and
yeah.
Every program book, my mom's picture was in the front, and I just remember every single show, just like opening that show's playbill, standing in the back, seeing the audience clapping, or seeing families come together, seeing a mom with her kids watching the plays and the musicals, and it just felt like, wow, we get to like create moments for other people now. So yeah, it was such a cool experience. I miss it. It was a lot of work, but yeah,
it's hard to keep doing all the things, right? Like you also have a really you're a fabulous speaker. You've talked about mental health to adolescents. You talked about sexual violence and resiliency. And now you have this wealth of experience as being a young caregiver. Is this a topic that you have added to your speaking stuff that you put out to schools and other places where young people collect?
Not really. I have done a lot of healthcare, medical advocacy events, fundraisers. I think by virtue of the book, people find and ask and request speeches, but I do like to mention in my talks that like my mom has passed.
I'm not using that.
Oh, sorry. My son, never a dull moment. So never a dull moment here. He's cleaning the patio porch and he's got questions. He's home for a couple of weeks from college. So I love that. Yeah. I love that, you have this experience speaking and, maybe just planting a bug in your ear, because I do feel like there's not a lot of young people talking about youth caregivers. Mm-hmm. And yet people think that caregivers are older adults, right? But almost half of them are under the age of 50. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, even what the percentages of under the age of 30, but that would be something interesting. But I know that it would be, one more thing for you to do, but the speaking, it's one more thing in the topics that you're already talking about. I'm sure you're a fabulous speaker on the topics that you're sharing with young people. And if they're interested, we'll share, all the links to your stuff in the show notes about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's talk about self-care a little bit. What is your definition of self-care, Ashley?
Definition. I think it's just staying ahead of retaining your sense of independence and identity. And I think, we can talk about like the hows, like meditation, music, art, whatever you're into, but I think self-care is really preserving your own identity. It's so easy to lose who you are as a caregiver, as a parent. We can just adapt to situations and lose our sense of self in the process. So I think when I think about self-care, that's what it means to me, is how do I make sure I'm still doing the things that I love, being Ashley, fueling my emotional, spiritual, physical needs, versus sacrificing it all to other people or other responsibilities.
Nice. What did that look like for you? Like in that 8 years of caring for your mom, like what were some of the things that you infused? Because self-care is different for everybody, but we like to get different ideas from the folks that we talk to.
It was inconsistent, that's for sure. I think I made sure to take care of my physical health, but I'm also somebody who tends to work out pretty frequently anyway. So I made sure I kept that in my routine. And if I noticed that it wasn't in my routine, I would feel it, physically I'd feel it. So for me, exercise was a big one, but I've always loved like a long, quiet walk. So there were times where the only spare time I would have was waking up an hour earlier and just walking around the neighborhood. And it's amazing how like even just a 10-minute walk in the morning can change your mood and change your day. So I was big on walking, big on like, I love the ocean. So just if I needed to, driving to the ocean, even just sitting in my car in the winter, just having tiny little moments of quiet, just for me. I think that's probably what I did the most frequently. And then some of the other things too, like I mentioned, my relationship wasn't that great. There was a whole summer we didn't go on any dates. We didn't do anything. He was constantly working and I was constantly caregiving. And finally, I just got fed up and I started to take myself out on dates. Like I found this classical music concert. I bought myself a ticket. I got all dressed up, went and had a glass of wine, listened to classical music. I'd go to the movies alone. I was just like, you know what? If I can't wait for people to be available the day I'm ready to like take 5 minutes off, I'm just going to do things on my own. So yeah, balance between grounding and quiet time and just going after experiences and taking myself out, even if I had to do it alone.
It's so good. I mean, the solo dating this dating yourself is such a great idea. We do this activity, Happy Healthy Caregiver, we do a couple different things. We do the 20 for 2023 list of like 20 things that we want to do in the year that help us infuse joy. And then there's just like your general joy list, like of the things that bring you joy. For me, I love a flight of ciders or wine, or I love going out and eating with chopsticks, or live music and infusing sunshine in my day and all of that. And so I think that's, important that have tried on different things and you've found what works for you. And I applaud you for not waiting for other people, because you're listening to your body and what it needs to feel refreshed. And sometimes it's the quick little fill up, of energy that you need, but sometimes it's an extended thing. And you've done some trips by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, all the time. But yeah, I mean, I have no problem taking myself on a vacation. I mean, if anything, I think I prefer it. I just, a few books or a whole bag of books, a beach day. Yeah, I kind of just
room service, sitting hanging out at the bar. I love that. It sounds so
shut off the noise, just the busyness of everyday life. Yeah.
So interesting. I think maybe you've given somebody an idea there. What do you do now to recharge your energy and gain peace today, like now after caregiving?
Yeah. I mean, I left my job not surprisingly, about a year after my mom passed. I always wanted to work for myself, but that was even more of a catalyst to do it sooner because I wanted to find balance. And even if I still had a job, I would do this, but I try to make sure that every day is a mix of, work, but also just those quiet moments, grounding, whether I take a walk or just meditate for 10 minutes, or I have a keyboard here, I'll just stop and play piano for a half hour. I just have all these little different hobbies and interests, and I try to do a little something different every day. But I think that my number one go-to always is being outside, being in nature, whether it's a walk, a bike ride, sitting in my car bundled up at the beach. Those are my go-tos, is just being out in nature. It makes all the
Yeah.
other stuff feel much smaller in perspective.
Yeah, you and I are very similar that way. I have to get outside every day. And I also have to do something physically active. Like I get grumpy and grouchy 2 days, I think, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do something. Well, let's pick your brain a little bit. This is a book I wrote called the Just for You Daily Self-Care Journal. It's a prompted journal because sometimes people are very intimidated by journaling in a blank page. So this kind of gets you to really put a little focus on yourself as a family caregiver, which can be tough. And also, get you writing, whether it's a couple sentences or whatever. So, but let's do give you some verbal prompts here. Okay, since you said you have your bag of books, do you have, on one side it says, what's the best nonfiction book you've ever read or the best fiction book you've ever read? And best is hard, but one of the best, let's say.
I'll go with fiction. I love the book, The Little Prince. Oh my gosh, like classic. It's a children's book, but with adult themes in it. It's a short, quick read. I have it on my bedside table. I frequently read it. It's definitely one of my tops, but I love lots of classics. I love The Great Gatsby. I reread it every summer. But yeah, Little Prince has to be my favorite. I've got the rose that lives on the asterisk tattooed on the back of my arm. So that's definitely my fave.
Did your mom read it to you?
No, I
No,
it
you
after the
discovered it
fact.
on your own. Oh, I love that. I'm not sure if I've read it. I'm going to add it to my list for sure. I've seen it but I don't know that I've read it. How do you celebrate your personal successes? Sometimes I think we just kind of like on to the next thing. Like, what do you do to kind of just celebrate some of the things that are going well for you or for your business?
I think I try to just sit and let myself be with it. I'm really big on reflecting on where I was and where I am today. So I usually just try to, like, if a big win happens or an accomplishment or I get some great news, I just try to sit with it, versus thinking a million things, reaching out to people, doing the next thing. I just try to sit and let it sink in and let myself just receive it. Because I think that's the missing piece. We don't let ourselves receive things. We just get it and we're excited and it moves that way and we're on to the next. So I just try to be with it.
I like it. You're such an inspiration to people with your talks and the different media that you put out there. But where do you find your inspiration to be healthy and to be happy?
Well, I think I have a pretty clear vision of what I want from my life, and that becomes a good compass, in knowing that the choices I make today serve the long-term vision. And then, like many people, I mean, there are people online that I follow. There's, coaches and writers and authors and speakers that I just love consuming their content. There's certain podcasts that I go to every day for inspiration or just motivation to stay focused in my business and my goals. So there's a wide variety of people.
Yeah. What's one of your podcasts that you like?
Ooh, right now I'm listening to one that blends business and spirituality, which I like. It's called Mind Your Business. James Webb, he's great. I listen to lots
check it
of
out.
crime podcasts to unplug.
What kind of podcast? Oh, true crime. Yes, those are
self-care.
so fun. Yes.
But yeah,
We
I
just did that. My
really
husband
like
and I on our anniversary drive, we listened to a true crime podcast or something together. Yeah, it's part of your self-care, right? It doesn't always have to be intellectually, making you stronger. But yeah, very cool. Okay, last question, Ashley. What was the best advice or one of the best advice pieces that you ever received? This kind of sticks with you.
I think there's two that stick out. One, my best friend said when I was like 15 years old, I was going through something big, a secret only she knew. And she said, Ashley, if anyone can get through this, it's you. You're the strongest person I know. And it was just like this little reminder of like, you know, you can get through tough things. Like, and it was like one of many things. So kind of this like recurring theme of I always have this reserve of resilience in me. I can do it. And then the other was my sister. When I was thinking about leaving my job, she had said to me, well, I mean, you're not that interested in your job right now anymore anyway. So if it doesn't work out, you just go find another job. And it was like, so obvious and simple, like, oh, you're right. Like if it doesn't work out, you just try something else. And so just, I think those two things, like I can get through tough things. And if I try this and if it doesn't work, no big deal. You just move on to the next thing.
Right, right.
That's just a good little daily motto to follow.
I think that's good. And I mean, sometimes these decisions, like we can make them, you know, so much bigger, but there's very few things that are not, you know, that you can't pivot from and aren't reversible in some way. Well, how do we support you? Like now that you've, you know, you're working on your own 100% now, right? And what can we do, the folks that are listening, like how can we best support you? Where do we learn more about you? And then what any closing thoughts or anything that we didn't mention that you want to make sure is stated on a podcast?
I mean, I think just, you know, if you're interested in the book, again, it's The Language of Time, Ashley Bendiksen. It's on Amazon or really any major bookseller's website, Barnes and Noble. So wherever you feel comfortable shopping. There's also a website for it, thelanguageoftime.com. And then, yeah, just a quick, you know, plug for what I do pretty much full time. I speak to students. I speak to high school students, middle schoolers, college students, specializing in dating violence, so healthy relationships, how to teach young people to set boundaries, use their voice, have personal values, self-leadership, build their own sense of identity, autonomy, all those things. And I love it. It's what I needed as a teenager. So most of my work is speaking in schools. I travel the country doing this, and all that information is at ashleybendiksen.com. So whether it's, you know, you want to just connect with a caregiver and have some solidarity and support, or you think like, we need someone like that to talk to my kid's school, let me know. I'll be available for either.
Yes. And I think I mean, so many of the great business ideas like you've gotten have grown out of something, at adversity. So I applaud you for just kind of taking the leap and going for it. And, you know, it's important to not have regrets, like, oh, I wonder if that would have ever, but if it was something that you needed, then I'm sure there's so many kids out there that need that same thing, and who better to hear it from you and with your personal stories. Well, we will be sure to link to the book, to your website, and to all of that in the show notes page. And I'm just thrilled to have this time with you, Ashley. And thank you so much for honoring your mom and surviving through some big trauma at a young age, and sharing your story to better help other people that might be in a similar situation.
Thank you. And actually, one closing thing did come to me, if you don't mind me
Okay,
adding
good.
quick.
Yeah.
For anybody who is out of the caregiving cycle and you want to still give back and get involved, that's something that I've done in the years following. I would say look up your local nonprofits. For me, it was the Alzheimer's Association. There's endless ways to volunteer, whether it's volunteering for walks, joining committees. I chaired my walk for years. I got involved with policy work. So maybe there's a bill you want to pass in your state. The one I focused on was requiring doctors to give diagnoses. So there's a lot of beautiful ways that you can still honor your loved one's legacy and do something to support other families and other caregivers. So plenty of ways to get involved and again, take a positive spin to what you've been through.
Yes, good. I will link to the ALS Association, and then also, maybe for the local advocacy stuff, just kind of getting into tune with following your local, your local leaders and one of the organizations that I'm just started to become a fellowship for that does a lot of advocacy is Caring Across Generations. So they're not in all the states, but they're definitely in Georgia, California, Illinois, and a few others. So a way to kind of use your voice and your stories for good.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley, for that reminder. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Elizabeth.